Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marianne Pinkston, and this is The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston. And I am so happy to have you in today. We're going to talk about a controversial subject, but an incredibly important subject. I don't touch on it much because of its controversy, but my heart is ever so deep into COVID and long COVID, because this is a fact of life that has been around us since 2020 now, 2021, and still dealing with things after the fact. And so I have a couple of guests who have been on with me before. I've got Bob Long and Dr. Hans Vink on, both of which are extremely well studied in this area, but work with Glycocalyx, the Glycocalyx, and the microvascular function of the body, and how this interacts now with more than just heart health, but COVID and long COVID. Gentlemen, welcome in. It is good to have you on again and see you.
Well, thank you very much, Marianne. We're excited to be with you today and talk to your audience about this very exciting topic that has been on people's minds now for over 5 years.
Absolutely. Can you believe we can say that? 5 years now since all this mess has happened. So yeah, but still hanging on.
Yeah. So if you're okay, we'll go ahead and just get started.
Let's roll.
So what I wanted to do first is give a quick introduction about, kind of what happened with COVID.
Yeah.
It's been 5 years already. And when Hans and I actually, in February of 2020, we were in Belgium and we were just kicking off a big study with a consortium in Europe.
Wow.
That we were doing on brain health and the link to cardiovascular health, and trying to understand what happens when your capillaries break down,
right,
and if there's a correlationship. And so we had just come from that conference, and I remember walking through the airport in Amsterdam, and I'd see people with masks on, mostly Asian, probably people from China.
Sure.
I thought, wow, I wonder what's going on. And then when I got home, my wife was just leaving to go on a trip with her sister. It was going to be a 24-day cruise to the Middle East. And so they flew into Dubai and they went around and saw Dubai for 2 or 3 days. And then right at that time, you may remember Rudy Gobert. So we started hearing about this thing nobody had heard of before, right, COVID-19.
Yeah.
And then Rudy Gobert supposedly was tested positive for COVID-19. And I knew that because I was going to watch the Jazz game. So he was out.
Right.
And then the next morning, Donald Trump came on TV and said, hey, we've got a major world pandemic. We're calling a big emergency. And if you're traveling, you need to be home in the next 48 hours or you're not going to be allowed into the country. I don't know if you remember this.
I do. I remember all too well.
So I'm like panicking because my wife's in a whole different time zone, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get her home?
Oh my
and so
gosh.
We got her home. It was a big pain, but we did get her home and her sister home, and her friend was traveling with them that was a breast cancer survivor. So her doctor was freaked out because she didn't know. She didn't want her to get sick.
Sure.
So then that led to all kinds of, I guess, confusion and a lot of information. It started coming from the CDC and all kinds of stuff. And there was so many mixed messages. And then you started hearing about people that were getting sick. And they were, people were going into the ICU, and then they started reporting how many people had died and all this kind of stuff, if you'll remember. And so it really, and then, businesses started shutting down, and then they closed the schools.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to church. You pretty much, everybody was sequestered to their house.
Right.
Then there was a run on the grocery stores.
Right. All the toilet paper disappeared.
Groceries. So, at the beginning of this whole thing, it was really upsetting and traumatic to a lot of people.
Very much.
And so as Hans and I talked, we knew immediately what the virus was doing. and why it was so devastating to certain people with comorbidities. And so, as it turned out, we were already involved in studies in a lot of research hospitals around the world. Specifically, in some of these, we were doing it in the ICU with with sepsis patients. And so then what started happening is all the ERs and the ICUs were filling up with patients. And so we were in a good place that we could contact researchers that were working with on other projects.
Right.
And we could start testing people with the Glycocheck as they came into the ER and then as they evolved into the ICU.
Yes.
And so we were one of the first groups to publish studies on the effect of what COVID was doing as the virus to your glycocalyx and the microcirculation, and then what it did to the body.
Yes.
And so what we'd like to talk about today, and I don't want to take much more time, but COVID is real. It's not a hoax. It did real damage to our bodies. And we still know that there's a lot of people that suffer from what's now termed long COVID.
Yes.
And long COVID has a lot of different things that manifest themselves.
Yes.
And so I guess what we'd like to cover today is more explaining to your patients, because I'm sure they're all wondering, just as we wondered, what's really happened to me? What did COVID potentially do to me?
Sure.
And what's the long-term prospects if I have issues with COVID, and what could be done about it to improve my situation if I have long COVID symptoms?
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's what we'd like to cover today, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Please continue.
All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Hans and mute myself, and stop us at any point in time, Marianne, if you want have any questions that you think would be of interest to your audience.
You got it. Hello, Hans. It's good to see you. Dr. Vink, how are you?
Well, thank you so much, Marianne. It's very good to be here again, and very happy to share some of the data that Bob was referring to that we collected over the last few years.
Amazing.
Showing the impact of the COVID virus on how it damages our microvasculature and all the consequences.
Yes.
So let me just get started. If you don't mind, I give a little bit of a background so people know what the microvasculature is.
Yes.
And what the glycocalyx look like. Just want to start with this slide, just showing a typical example of the cardiovascular system that most people know on the left-hand side. We know we have a heart, large arteries, large blood vessels take blood from the heart with oxygen and nutrients to all our tissues, and then the blood is collected in big veins back to the heart. What many people do not know is these large vessels only make up like 1% the total vascular system that's in touch with your organs and your tissue cells. So if you look more closely and you zoom into a microscope in any tissue, in any organ, any cell in your body, is very close to tiny, tiny blood vessels that we call microscopic capillaries.
Right.
You really need a microscope to see how blood is flowing through these tiny microvessels, and that's where all the nutrients and oxygen is delivered to your organ. So it's critical that you have a healthy microvascular system, because that's our transport system to get the food into your organs. Now, I got interested decades ago in these tiny capillaries because something very interesting was happening if you look in more detail at such one individual capillary blood vessel. And this is one of those capillaries. They're tiny.
It's amazing.
The black dots are individual red blood cells going through one by one. And when we were looking at these capillaries with big microscope like this, we realized those red cells are never touching the wall. There's always a gap between where the blood is flowing and the surface of the wall of those capillaries.
And if I might add, for those of you who are on Spotify or iTunes or, other, you can go over to drpbetterlife.com and find the YouTube link and go and see then the visuals that he has and is representing. It's very interesting. So please take a look over there when you get a chance.
Well, thank you for that. So I just want to further say that we now know that the gap between where blood is flowing and the surface of the blood vessel wall is now filled with a protective gel called glycocalyx. And it turns out that glycocalyx is super important to keep your vascular system healthy. And if we zoom in a little bit to that space with another microscope, an electron microscope, we get images like these. So this a cross section on the left, higher magnification on the right. So on top is where blood is flowing. On the bottom is the vessel wall, and you have these extensive bush-like structures growing on the inside of your blood vessels, occupying a lot of volume and actually forming a protective gel, like a gelatin pudding on the inside of your blood vessels that forms as like a non-stick coating that keeps your blood vessels smooth, nothing sticks to the wall, and keeps all your vessels healthy. Nice, that's called glycocalyx. And this slide here just shows all the important functional implications of a healthy glycocalyx. So a healthy glycocalyx makes sure when blood flows, it triggers nitric oxide production by the vessel wall. And nitric oxide is an important vasodilator that increases blood flow and keeps your blood vessels healthy. At the same time, glycocalyx binds antioxidant enzymes like superoxide dismutase, preventing further damage of your vasculature. And glycocalyx prevents leakage of fluids. It prevents sticking of blood platelets and preventing blood clotting. It prevents sticking of inflammatory cells, preventing local inflammation. So you can imagine if that breaks down for whatever reason, by exposure to smoking or diabetes, or by hypertension or by aging, all those protective properties of glycocalyx are compromised. And your vessels start to constrict, blood pressure goes up, platelets start sticking, causing blood clots, leukocytes start sticking, causing all kinds of inflammatory consequences. So your whole microvascular system starts shutting down, and organs get compromised. They don't get all the nutrients that they need. So in the next few slides, I would like to zoom in a little bit more on COVID, what it does. And one thing that people should understand, as long as you have a healthy glycocalyx, whatever is circulating in the blood cannot easily connect to the vessel wall itself. And on the vessel wall itself, which is made up on the inside by cells called endothelial cells, so endothelial cells present what we call adhesion molecules, receptors for stuff to bind to. So platelets bind to their adhesion molecules, inflammatory cells bind to their adhesion molecules. But these adhesion molecules are tiny. They're super small compared to the size of glycocalyx. So as long as glycocalyx is covering up all these adhesion molecules, nothing sticks to your vessel wall. Well, the same holds true for the virus, COVID virus. So on the outside of your COVID virus, you have proteins called spike proteins. And these spike proteins, now they can bind to the endothelium, to the vessel wall, via receptors that are called ACE2, angiotensin converting enzyme 2. But also these receptors are tiny. They're well down hidden below glycocalyx. And as long as your glycocalyx is healthy, it's very difficult for anything to get close to these adhesion molecules for the COVID virus. So that's also probably why we see that a lot of people that have already a compromised health, people with diabetes or obesity or any other reason why their glycocalyx and their microvasculature was compromised, are much more sensitive for all the consequences of the COVID virus binding to the vessel wall.
Correct.
So before I move on, I'll show this slide. So I'm going to show you some data that we collected with the Glycocheck system. The Glycocheck system is a small handheld microscope that we use in clinical studies to image the microvasculature and measure the health of your glycocalyx sublingually in the mouth. And then obviously the last 10 plus years that I've been working with Bob, we have been focused on developing specific glycocalyx therapeutics. And the latest generation is called Rivasca. It's based on seaweeds that turn out to be identical in shape and molecular shape as glycocalyx polysaccharides. So with these nutraceuticals and these seaweed-based treatments, we can actually restore glycocalyx. And I'll show you down the road some of the studies that we're doing, especially on patients that were exposed to COVID,
Nice.
and were hospitalized, and now are suffering for years after recovering from COVID,
Yeah.
still from all kinds of symptoms.
Right.
Show that these people still have a compromised microvasculature, and hopefully we can help them now with the Revasca recover
And
faster.
you may be about to go through that list, but what are some of the things that people, when we call it long COVID, people may not know or really understand, what that is or what they may be suffering from? They may have symptoms and not realize what it is. What are those symptoms?
Well, it's a wide variety of symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most heard symptoms is people are very tired.
Right.
Don't have a lot of energy. They used to be super active, doing sports, living active lives.
Right.
And some of these people can hardly get out of bed.
Right.
Just getting up and then they're exhausted. Another complaint is mental focus. They cannot
Right.
concentrate on anything. So even if they would be able to get up, they cannot actually perform. And that's basically the two major complaints that I've been hearing. People just super tired, cannot focus, cannot function anymore, cannot exercise, cannot go to their jobs. So just really slowing them down without really understanding what's happening.
Correct.
And as I will show you in a few minutes, what we realized, as soon as Glycocalyx is damaged by COVID, you lose a lot of your small capillaries. It makes it very difficult to get nutrients into your organs and stay your organs functional and healthy. And when that happens, it takes forever to recover, if at all. So people need some help to recover.
Right.
So Hans, I was just going to add a couple of thoughts there. So another thing that probably people read a lot about in the news, and maybe they even have friends or family, but you're seeing an acceleration or an increase even in young people of type 2 diabetes. You're seeing an acceleration in unexplained heart attacks and strokes in people that were supposedly, to everybody's knowledge, healthy. So you're seeing documented, you read it in the news all the time, increases in morbidity, which is measuring people that are disabled. And then you're also seeing increases in mortality rates. So people, it's reducing the length of time that people are living. And so we have people that report, neuropathy, people that have slow wound healing. As you talked about, their lungs don't work as well. So it's manifesting itself systemically in the body. And I think that's what you're going to talk about next, is how and why could this one thing, COVID, how could it impact so many things in our body?
Correct.
Well, sure. And before I do that, Bob, after talking about Revasca, I guess we have this
good
deal. So can you explain a little bit, Bob?
Oh, yeah, sure. So we have a special offer for Dr. Pinkston's patients and also her listeners that are interested. It's a special offer. There's a coupon code, and she'll have it on her website as well.
Yes.
And you just scan the QR code and follow the instructions. And what it does, it's a buy one, get one free. So basically, the normal retail price is $99.95. Because you're listening to the podcast today, you can get 2 bottles for the price of 1 to get started. And then if you find that it's helping you, you can go to our website, glycocalyx.com, and then you can sign up for Smart Ship, and we'll send it to you every month.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you guys for that. I appreciate that so much.
Well, let me just continue. So as I showed you before, the COVID virus particle using its spike protein can bind to its receptors on the endothelium. And when it does so, and this is a picture showing on top is the lung where the virus enters your system, and then it enters the vascular space, and shows all the damage that it does to your vascular space when it binds to your endothelium. So on the left is a healthy vascular system with a lot of glycocalyx. On the right-hand side, glycocalyx is damaged. You have a lot of inflammatory cytokines circulating, and a lot of immune cells sticking to the wall. So as soon as the particle binds to the endothelium, glycocalyx is compromised, and a lot of organ complications will follow. And I'll show you some of the data that we collected. just a little overview. So that receptor, that ACE2, that is used by the COVID particles to bind in different parts of your body, is present all over your body. So this just shows an overview that the ACE2 is expressed in your nervous system, in your upper airways, in your vascular system, in your lungs, in your liver, your eyes, heart, kidneys, gut, so any organ you can think of pretty much. The virus can bind and cause damage. And today I'll focus mostly on the vascular system and some of heart function. And as we discussed before, now people that were exposed to COVID, if you look at their consequences down the road in terms of heart attacks and strokes or cardiovascular death, what we call major adverse cardiovascular events, people exposed to COVID have a much higher chance of getting all these complications. But this is just a curve showing over time, so over the last 3 years, what the risk is of a heart attack or a stroke for people with and without being exposed to COVID. So the lower two lines, so the dotted line on the bottom, are healthy individuals that didn't have COVID and don't have any cardiovascular disease issues.
Wow.
And over time, there's very low chance of these people getting a stroke or heart attack, as we would expect.
Right.
Well, only about 2 or 3% in over 3 years' time risk. The other line on top of that is that risk increases from 2% to 3% up to almost 20% for people just being exposed to COVID virus when they were sick, had to be hospitalized, and even in the absence of any other cardiovascular disease. So they were super healthy otherwise. Just getting infected by COVID increased their risk of a heart attack or a stroke from like 2 or 3% almost to 20%. So there's about a 6-fold increase in risk of a major adverse cardiovascular event after being sick from COVID. But even people with all kinds of other issues, because of diabetes, for instance, people with cardiovascular disease, with cardiovascular disease, without COVID, obviously, they already have a high risk. But on top of the other cardiovascular disease complications, if they did get COVID, then again, their risk for a heart attack or stroke more than doubles on top of their already high risk that they have because of all the other risk factors. So that's a major impact.
So may I ask you, because I think that, this has been going on for some time, as you mentioned, it's been 5 years now, approximately. And the kind of alert level has died down, so to speak. I think most people are, it's kind of a part of our lives now. But is the threat really gone? I don't want to fearmonger, but is the threat really gone? Is there still something to be concerned about? I think that's what you're describing here. I kind of want to drive that point home a little bit that, there is still concern. There's still something to worry about.
There's still concern. So these data make it perfectly clear that although it might have been years ago and you might have recovered from COVID,
sure,
being exposed to COVID and being in the hospital at that time with COVID, increase your risk of a stroke or heart attack almost 6 times. So it's huge.
Wow.
So you still want to make sure you do follow-ups and try to improve your health as much as you can.
Thank you. Yes,
definitely. And this is a similar graph, just a little bit more detailed. Again, compares people that are completely healthy without COVID exposure or any other risk factors for cardiovascular disease, very low risk for complications. And then if you start adding risk factors like peripheral artery disease or diabetes or cardiovascular disease, in the absence of COVID, all these risk factors causes increases your risk from 2% to 20% as before. But then again, if you just have COVID and no other cardiovascular risk factors, that's this line here, that by itself, again, 6-fold, 7-fold increase in risk for a heart attack and a stroke.
Amazing.
And if you already have these risk factors like diabetes or peripheral artery disease, and you were exposed to COVID, that further increases your risk. And the total risk increase is about 12 times compared to an otherwise healthy individual. So if you don't have cardiovascular disease or COVID, but you have very low risk. But if you have diabetes plus COVID, for instance, your risk of a heart attack increased more than 10-fold. So it's really serious, and it's not gone. You have to be careful and watch your health all the time.
Thank you.
So to study that more specifically in detail, what the impact was of COVID on the microvascular system of Glycocalyx, we used the Glycocheck system as I explained before. We image live the microvasculature in the mouth, in the sublingual space. So still, after decades, I still enjoy watching how red cells are moving,
That's
like
so cool.
little hands running through your microvasculature.
Yeah.
So you can easily count how many small microvessels you have. And we have an algorithm in place to measure the health of your glycocalyx. So basically what we did these measurements in all kinds of healthy people and patients with COVID in the ICU, and just count how many of the small capillaries do you have, even without any other further exercise, just under resting conditions. And we realized, if you look on the top figure, on the resting conditions, a healthy individual, not all your capillaries are being perfused, so some of them you don't need at that point, and some reserve when you start exercising, but a fair amount is being perfused. If you look at patients at risk, including COVID patients, the number of capillaries is significantly less than it should be. And that puts them at risk. That's the same thing that will happen when you're exposed to diabetes or other cardiovascular risk factors. COVID has the same impact. The big contrast is the cardiovascular disease risk factors takes a decade or 2 decades for risk really to show itself and organs to start losing function. Exposure to COVID wiped it out in days and set you back for decades and put you at a much higher level of risk than you should have been at that age or that risk profile.
Amazing.
Well, when this is just data showing now how many capillaries you lose just in healthy individuals as a function of risk. So here we compared people with medium risk or high risk based on their smoking behavior or their age, for instance, compared to low risk individuals. You lose already about 30 to 50% of your capillaries just by the known risk factors. Now, if you look at COVID patients, and they're shown here on the right-hand side, COVID patients that are really sick in the ICU, they lose up to 90% of their small capillaries. So you can imagine if you lose so many capillaries, and that's throughout your whole body, it's almost impossible to get enough nutrients, food, and oxygen into your organs. So your kidneys will suffer, your lungs will suffer, your heart will suffer, your brain will suffer, because it's impossible to get nutrients all over the place, and there will be spots in each individual organ that will be compromised and lose function. Well, this is just showing the same. So a lot of glycocalyx damage. Your microvascular health declines significantly to very low levels of microvascular health. And if you take a blood sample, you see increasing levels of glycocalyx breakdown products, not surprisingly. And as a result, if you look at these acute settings and people in the ICU with COVID, we can see how many of them will survive. And what we did, again, using the Glycocheck system, we measured the health of their microvascular system, their health and the level of damage to their glycocalyx. So we actually made 2 groups. They're all COVID patients in the ICU, so they're all pretty sick. And then based on their Glycocheck measurements, we measured whether the glycocalyx were still in an okay shape. So that top blue line, those are people with minor level of glycocalyx damage. And then with the red line, which are patients in the ICU with a severely compromised glycocalyx. And this is a survival curve. So we are monitoring patients in the ICU for up to 2 months. And as long as your glycocalyx is in good shape, all of these patients survive their stay in the ICU. People with a compromised glycocalyx and a damaged microvasculature, you see the longer they stay in the ICU, the more risk of organ complications and the smaller that chance of survival. So these patients with a compromised glycocalyx, if they stay more than a month in the ICU, their chance of survival is about 20% compared to 100% for people staying in the ICU for up to 2 months, as long as your glycocalyx is in good shape. So it really tells us, your glycocalyx is key defense mechanism to keep your organs healthy, and then you can actually recover from exposures like COVID or other risk factors.
Doesn't that explain a lot of what people heard in the news, about survivability and this?
Yeah, so that also explains that people with a compromised glycocalyx are so much more at risk for anything, including complications of
explains
COVID.
a lot.
Over the last
and if I might,
sure, go ahead, Bob.
If I could just add one more thing. So you could see that healthy blue line the measure that we measure to see how thick your glycocalyx is, which is also, we view it as a measure of your systemic inflammation, if you want to think of it that way. So what we deemed healthy for this study, because we were dealing with really sick people, was 2.3 microns. In a study that we completed that was retrospective, it was a cardiovascular study looking at risk factors over 6 years. We knew that we learned from that study if your score was above 2.10. So what we're saying, this is a 0.20 microns higher than where we saw risk factors and could accurately predict 6 years in advance people that would have heart attacks or strokes. So this just further illustrates why you're seeing everything you're reading in the news today.
Beautifully, actually. And so
yeah, go ahead, Marianne.
And so we actually have hit about the halfway mark. I do need to take a short break for a sponsor, but I want for people to know where they can find more information about testing, and of course the Revasca and all, which you stated clearly beginning, but I would love for people to be able to find you. And also I want people to know that they can go to drpbetterlife.com and find our previous shows. We've done this a couple of times now, and with great information, and can get a recap of what it does for the cardiovascular system, since we're concentrating on COVID now, but drpbetterlife.com. But where can people find you? And then we'll take a short break and be right back with some hope.
Sure.
Depression, anxiety, low energy, weakness, these are just some symptoms of low B12 levels. And the absorbable B12 folate supplement that's helping people declare victory over depression symptoms is De Novo Plus B12 by Magna Pharmaceuticals. Patients with symptoms of depression often exhibit low levels of folate and vitamin B12. The human body needs sufficient folate intake to produce the essential neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These neurotransmitters alleviate feelings of sadness, anxiety, and gloom. What makes De Novo Plus B12 so successful? De Novo Plus B12 contains readily absorbable folate and B12. That means it's more successful at correcting the root cause of your deficiency, not just the symptoms. Whether you are suffering with low energy, depression, fatigue, or anxiety, you owe it to yourself to learn more at magnaweb.com. That's magnaweb.com. Please let us know at checkout that you heard about De Novo Plus B12 on The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston.
Sorry about that. Jumped straight in, but tell us where we can find all the information here, and where to get tested, and the Revasca.
Sure. The best place is just to go to Glycocalyx, and it's down here in the left-hand corner, spelled GLYCOCALYX.com. And they can find all of our studies there. They can find information about the Glycocheck. There's also a directory of clinics that have the Glycocheck. So if you're interested in getting tested with the Glycocheck, there's a locator, and you can find out if there's one near you, and you can go in and get tested. And Hans will show some data, but what we see consistently with using the Glycocheck test, we see the damage that's been done to your true capillary network. And there's also a lot of information there about Revasca as well. So I'll turn it back to Dr. Vink so we can keep covering the information we wanted to cover with your audience today.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So as we started discussing, when COVID damages your glycocalyx, but even after recovering from your COVID, the damage is not gone. I just want to focus a little bit more on the longer-term consequences of that initial exposure. So this slide is showing hospitalized patients with COVID on the left, and shows a significant level of glycocalyx damage that's high. On the right-hand side are healthy controls, with, as predicted, a low level of glycocalyx damage. Then in the middle are people recovering from COVID. So they were out of the hospital, they are healthy, but even after recovering from the COVID, their level of glycocalyx is still high. And if you look at these individuals, how these high levels of glycocalyx damage correlate with other circulating risk factors, I'm going to show this slide. So these are just 4 examples that high levels of glycocalyx damage on the vertical axis increase with all kinds of other risk factors like lactate dehydrogenase, low levels of plasma albumin, which is a high-risk factor, increased levels of CRP, which is an inflammatory marker, and increased levels of IL-6, another inflammatory marker. So this just underlines that a compromised glycocalyx really indicates that you're still being exposed to a lot of inflammatory risk factors. Well, when we started doing the follow-up studies, this was after the first 12 months, this again showing levels of glycocalyx damage. It showed you that glycocalyx damage was increased 4 months after you had COVID, but even more increased even 12 months after COVID. So the damage actually continued and got worse.
Wow.
Well, the good thing, when we look for 2 years on the lower left, the initial increase in glycocalyx damage after 2 years appeared to be normalized again. So glycocalyx is in good shape. However, if you look on the top right, if you just keep counting the number of capillaries, as I told you before, if your glycocalyx is damaged, you start losing a lot of your capillaries. So, just being exposed to COVID, there's very low capillary numbers compared to what should be. It's less than 10% of the normal levels. But even after 2 years, although your glycocalyx is recovering now, you still have about a 50% reduction in the numbers of capillaries. You're still not even close to back to normal levels of capillary health. And with that, also your microvascular health is not even close to where it should be. Just want to skip forward this. And this is just a curve on the right-hand side as a function over time. It shows your capillary density, but also your microvascular health. And it doesn't matter whether people had COVID at home or whether they were hospitalized. Their microvascular score should be in the 5+ range, but it's like in the 2-3 range. Same for capillary density, should be like in the 80 to 100 range. It's more like in the 40 to 50 range, both for people at home or that were hospitalized. And on the right-hand side, it shows you if you follow these individuals over time. So we follow these people for 2 years, measure again over time their capillary density, the number of capillaries, as well as their microvascular health score. There's no trend of improving. So these numbers should be much higher, have a 50% hit on microvascular health. And for some reason, many people that were struck by COVID and had a lot of microvascular damage, they're not increasing their capillary health and microvascular health over time. So the body is unable to fix it themselves. So they stay at a compromised level, they stay at high risk. So something that needs to be done on top of this to help these people recover.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you have a way to do that. So I'm
pretty close to that
it's
point.
not all doom and gloom, folks.
No, we'll end
there
up
is
in
something
the
you
positive
can
note. I just want to show another way of measuring glycocalyx damage. We did a correlation study with proteomics. So we measure certain proteins that correlate with your glycocheck measurements. And then again, it shows if you have a high positive score in healthy people and people with COVID had a very low microvascular health scores based on the protein measurements. And one of the consequences is blood clotting. Not surprising. I told you when glycocalyx is compromised, there's a very high risk of blood clotting. And you can measure that in different ways. You can measure what we call D-dimer levels in blood, or you can measure outcome levels. But again, if you have a good microvascular health, you have very low levels of blood clotting factors in your blood. And the higher those blood clotting levels, you see correlate with very poor microvascular health. And not surprisingly, if you look at outcome after 28 days after being exposed, there's either people die or get intubated and have to go to the ICU. If you have poor microvascular health, very high risk of needing to go to the ICU or dying from COVID.
Right.
Well, now the good part. So we started doing studies with the glycocalyx supplement Revasca to see if we can repair a damaged glycocalyx and what the possible outcome is for people exposed to the COVID. Put another of the BOGO deal for Revasca in here for people that want to purchase Revasca at a discount. A little bit background on the Revasca. So as I told you, the main ingredients in the therapeutic are seaweeds that are very similar to those glycocalyx structures that I showed you in the beginning. So there's fucoidan, vascumin from the aloe vera plant, hyaluronic acid, all seaweeds that we know will repair and damage glycocalyx almost instantly when those seaweeds start circulating in the blood. And on top of that, there's some additional ingredients that help boost your nitric oxide production and your antioxidant level protection. All healthy food-based ingredients that combined have a synergistic effect, improving the health of your vasculature and your glycocalyx. So now, go ahead, Marianne.
I just want to kind of reiterate what you have already said, and that is a natural supplement with great science behind it. Of course, we're not going to just present something that is that doesn't have a good amount of studies and science behind it, and something natural too. I think most people are a little leery of pharmaceuticals, but when you get nutraceuticals involved, I think that with great studies behind it, I think that's wonderful, and you guys have done that. That's why we love promoting the Revasca.
All right, well,
thank you.
It's the best product we have so far. So
yes.
Some data, some of the studies that we did, I'm just going to take you through if you don't mind.
Sure.
One way of testing the impact of the COVID virus is taking blood samples from really sick COVID patients. Like showing on there's a COVID patient, take a blood sample, then we grow endothelial cells with glycocalyx in a petri dish.
Wow.
And we just add the blood sample on top and see what it does.
Wow.
And not surprisingly, if you look on glycocalyx size, now if you take a healthy sample from a healthy person, now you have a thick glycocalyx. If you take a sample from a person exposed to COVID that didn't get sick and didn't have to go to the hospital, nothing really happens. But if you take a sample from a person that got really sick because of COVID, something is circulating in the blood that causes a lot of glycocalyx damage and it wipes out your glycocalyx, even in these experimental settings.
Wow.
This is just confirming it not only wipes out your glycocalyx, but also wipes out the anti-clotting stuff that's associated with glycocalyx. So it makes it very likely that you'll have a lot of blood clots as soon as your glycocalyx is compromised.
Yeah.
And many other risk factors that we can measure. Angiotensin 2, soluble thrombomodulin, soluble glycocalyx breakdown product, they all go up when exposed to the toxins that are in the blood of a really sick COVID patient.
Wow.
Just going to skip this. The good thing is, if we have these damaged glycocalyxes and we expose them to the COVID toxins, if we add the supplement and add the seaweeds that are in the supplement, you can actually rebuild your glycocalyx, as shown here. You have a normal-sized glycocalyx in the presence of the toxins in that COVID patient's plasma. But as long as you have your supplement circulating at the same time, you can protect your glycocalyx and it doesn't break down. Same for the anti-blood clotting properties of glycocalyx. It's fully restored when glycocalyx is rebuilt. And also the inflammatory protection of glycocalyx is restored if you add those seaweeds in the supplement and are taking the supplement. So even being exposed to these highly toxic toxins of COVID in the blood of COVID patients, as long as you have Revasca and you take it and those ingredients are circulating in your blood, you can protect your glycocalyx against that damage. And this just shows the underlying data. All these bad things normalize back to low risk levels if you take the supplement.
That's great. And so good for not just those who have had COVID, very important, but also those who are at high risk for heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, hypertension, dementia, all these inflammatory disorders that we know now are, start way early in life and build as we go. And so good for a long list of diseases and prevention.
And the only way to really know if this, other than this, the first day was in the lab, obviously, and all experimental, but now we want to know, and really in people exposed to COVID, how do they respond to taking the Revasca? Are they getting better? Can they repair their glycocalyx? And does that have functional benefits for them to do so? So this is just a relatively small study, together with the group, again, in Greece from Ignatios Economides that we are collaborating with already for decades. The total number that started the study was 85 people, and they were split in two groups after removing some people that were not eligible, people getting the glycocalyx supplement, about 30 plus people, or people getting placebo, similar capsules, but not with the active ingredients, and see if that made a difference. So this shows the design of the study. So we get the supplement, and then we wait for 4 months and did a lot of measurements on glycocalyx health on their stiffness of their arteries. That's another risk factor. So if your arteries get stiffer, you have a high risk of heart attacks and strokes. To look at blood flow in the heart itself, called coronary flow reserve. If you start exercising, if you have a healthy heart and a healthy microvasculature, blood flow to the heart actually increases several fold to make sure you can perform. And we measured the level of oxidative stress, so the bad risk factors circulating in blood. And what we found after 4 months taking these supplements in the COVID patients, there was a significant improvement of glycocalyx health. There was a significant reduction of arterial stiffness. There was a significant reduction in circulating levels of oxidative stress and a significant improvement of coronary flow reserve, so the blood flow reserve capacity of the heart. And all those data, again, are shown more scientifically here. So significant reduction of glycocalyx damage only in the people taking the supplement, not in the placebo group. Significant reduction of arterial stiffness, not in the placebo group, and significant improvement of heart health and coronary flow reserve, and not people taking the placebo as a control. So really clearly showing that even within just 4 months taking the supplement, you can improve the health of the microvasculature, but also large vessels become more healthy. You can improve heart health and coronary flow reserve, and lower all kinds of oxidative stress levels circulating in the blood. So really clearly identifying that with Revasca and glycocalyx repair really can help people, especially once exposed to COVID.
Absolutely. And those of you on YouTube right now watching, you can see the QR code there for getting the ordering Revasca and your buy one, get one free, which I appreciate very much. You can also go to glycocalyx.com and use BOGO. Am I correct? And get the same deal. And I appreciate that very much. Glycocalyx.com. And I want to spell it correctly. GLYCOCALYX.com. And you can see these studies and all the information and more, and read a lot more about it. And then again, I get the code and the discount there. And I appreciate you gentlemen for that. So this is actually incredible information. And I love that it's about COVID and long COVID, but it's also about heart disease. And so I want people to know, or heart disease and microvascular disease. So I want people to know you can go to drpbetterlife.com. You have a link to the website and that information as well, but also to our previous shows where you guys go over the information on microvascular health and cardiovascular disease, as well as the other topics we discussed. Hypertension was our last show, and very, very interesting. You also have a link. If you'll go to the YouTube link and go to the network down at the bottom, you will have a link to their other shows and other podcasts. And so please take a look, drpbetterlife.com. Gentlemen, any last thoughts for the audience today?
No, we're just happy to be here with you, and hopefully we've unraveled some of the mystery of what happened with COVID-19, why even though it happened 5 years ago, we're still dealing with the impact of it, and it really is a real thing. And those people that had family or themselves that were impacted, they know all too well what we've talked about today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had COVID, and about 2 weeks later had AFib develop, some cardiovascular events. And I've had plenty of patients with blood clots and, kind of a continued asthma-like condition. It affected their upper airways, the fatigue, the neuropathies, dementia. I mean, we see patients all the time. It has not gone away. So please be alert to that. And yes, you guys have distinctly explained why all of this happened. It makes perfect sense with a great amount of science behind it. And I appreciate that very, very much.
Well,
very good.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
And
thank you.
We look forward to being with you another time to discuss another interesting topic for your audience.
You got it. Thank you. You were invited back always. And so everybody, I hope you have a fantastic week. Please go to the website, drpbetterlife.com, for more information. And please take care of each other out there. We'll see you next time.